A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to week number 9, recorded lecture number 22. Today in this lecture, we shall start neutral and positive messages, right? Okay, so now let's move towards these five types of audience. Well, we begin with the first, that is the initial audience, right? Well, it is the audience to get your message. I mean, it is the audience that we usually have in our mind, that they are the people who will receive the message. Like in your presentation, those who are listening to you, present in to listen to you, they are your initial audience, right? Those who receive the message. But remember, we shall be keeping organizational context in mind. So we are discussing these five types of audiences with particular reference to the communication within the organization, right? Mostly there will be one or two elements where we will also talk about external factor as well, but mostly they refer to organizational communication. So initial audience is the audience for whom you will be preparing your message. Your message can be the letter, email, or report, or even it can be presentation, but this time our focus is on writing. Okay, sometimes the initial audience tells you to write the message. They can be the people who can ask you to write the message. Like your boss asks you to prepare a report. So your boss is initial audience, right? And then you are actually preparing that report for your boss, for your manager, or for your immediate reporting officer. So because you are preparing report for him or her, that is your initial audience, you are writing the report for your boss. Or at the same time, the same person asks you to write the report. So in some cases, your initial audience can be the one that asks you to you know start that communication or write that communication. Now the second type of audience is the gatekeeper audience, right? Well, it has the power to stop your message instead of sending it on to the other audiences, right? You know, this audience decides whether your message should be sent forwarded or it should be stopped there. Again, we can say your head of the department or your uh, manager or your boss can be the gatekeeper audience as well. Like you wrote the report, you sent it to your boss. So he or she is initial audience because that is the direct recipient, and at the same time, uh, he or she may have asked you to write that report, but if the person also has power to stop your message from going uh, to the next level, that next level can be the upper management, that can also be the client. So your boss has, or your senior has, the authority to stop your message. He or she may feel that there are certain corrections that are required, so he or she has power to stop your message. Well, the gatekeeper therefore controls whether your message event gets to the primary audience, right? Whether your message even gets to the primary audience. So he or she decides. Well, the supervisor who assigns the message can also be the gatekeeper audience. As I have discussed, that your boss asks you to write a report, right? And that report is actually meant to be sent to the client. Then the first person for whom you are preparing the report is your boss, because he is going to receive it and he or she is going to read it, right? And then uh, your boss or senior or manager also has authority. If he or she feels that that is not an appropriate report, so he or she can stop your report from going out to the client, right? Gatekeepers in an organization usually are the higher authorities. They can also be outsiders. Usually they are higher authorities, but in certain cases they may also be outsiders who are acting as gatekeeper audience. Okay, so moving forward to other types of audiences within organizational setting. Yes, now we have this the primary audience, right? The primary audience is actually the audience that will decide whether to accept your recommendations or not, right? So it's up to them whether they accept your recommendations or they reject your recommendations, right? So the sender must reach the primary audience to fulfill his or her purpose in any message. So if you want to complete or attain purpose of your message, then obviously you must reach the primary audience, right? Because they are the ones who are actually going to make the final decision about whatever the recommendations you make in a particular context or for a particular project. Well, the secondary audience is actually the audience that may be asked to comment on your message or to implement your ideas after they have been approved, right? For example, you prepared, your head of your department asked you to write that project report, a small project report, and then once you had written, then the head of the department may give that report to an others member who is senior than you know, to comment on your report, to see maybe strengths of your report, and to ensure whether all elements have been covered or not. So in that case, that other senior member or senior colleague can be your secondary audience, right? Your secondary audience can also be the people who will implement the recommendations that you give, right? And of course, those recommendations that you give will be sent for implementation only after approval of the concerned people, or we usually use a term, approval of the competent authority, like those people who are administratively responsible for doing that all. So after getting approval from there, there can be different bodies, there can be individuals, right, like board of directors and so on and so forth. Then if your recommendations are or your proposal is going to be implemented, then those people who will actually be implementing your proposal or recommendations, they will also be your secondary audience, right? Then secondary audience also includes lawyers who may use your message as evidence of your organization's culture and practices. So, you know, lawyers or they can use it as an evidence to show what your organizational culture is, what your practices are. That's why one has to be, very careful while working on official documents, because they can be discussed and they can be quoted at different forums, right? Now moving towards the last type of audience, that is watchdog audience. Okay, so this watchdog audience, it actually does not act directly because it does not have the power to stop your message, but it has political, social, or economic power. Like your gatekeeper audience, suppose your boss, he or she has direct authority to stop your message because they are gatekeeper audience. They have direct influence on you. Well, this watchdog audience, they do not have any power to directly stop you. They do not have that authority, right? So usually this watchdog audience does not act directly because they do not have power to stop you. But it has some political, social, or economic power. Like those people who are receiving your message, they may not have direct power to stop you, but they can have some political power to indirectly influence you. They can have some social power in that particular social context to influence you and your message. They can also have that economic power, that they are in such a strong economic position where they can use their resources to indirectly stop your message. Well, the watchdog audience pays close attention between you and the primary audience, and they base further actions on the evaluation of your message. So they very keenly and closely observe your communication with your primary audience, the audience for whom you prepare your message, and they keenly observe it, and they critically analyze it, and whatever the next step they shall be taking, maybe a social step or economic step or political step. So that will be based on uh, the observation of your uh, communication with the primary audience. So we need to be careful about these five types of audiences, and rather we need to be aware of these five types of audiences, so that when we write a message for internal communication or within an organization representing an organization, so we shall be able to monitor it, and we shall be able to understand it, and we should keep these all elements in mind, that these are the elements that I should keep in mind while preparing or writing for official communication. Well, let us have an example of audience analysis. Well, this Dawn is an assistant account executive in an ad agency. Ad is advertisement agency. Her boss asks her to write a proposal for a marketing plan for a new product that the agency client is introducing. So, her primary audience is the executive committee of the client company, because she will be writing the report for them. Sorry, the proposal for them. And the company executive committee will decide whether to adopt the plan or not. The secondary audience includes the marketing staff of the client company, who will be asked for comments on the plan, as well as the artists, writers, and media buyers, who will carry out details of the plan if it is adopted. So these all are going to be secondary audience: staff, artists, writers, and media buyers who will carry out details. So they all are secondary audience, because they will give their comments, and later on they may be asked to implement that proposal if it gets approved. So her boss, who must approve the plan before it is submitted, like Dawn's boss, immediate boss, uh, you know, uh, who must approve the plan before it is submitted to the client, is both initial and gatekeeper audience. Initial audience, because her boss asked her to prepare that proposal, and gatekeeper audience, because the boss has authority to stop if the boss feels that is not an appropriate proposal. He or she will not send to the client, and of course if it doesn't get sent, the rest of the process doesn't take place. So uh, in this case we have seen that in one example there is primary audiences there, secondary audiences there, initial audiences there, and gatekeeper audiences there, right? So similarly, in different writing contexts that you shall be receiving at workplace, there can be uh, all of these types, or there may be some of these types. Like in this case, four types are there, but the watchdog is not present in this case, right? So similarly, in different contexts at workplace, you can have one or two types missing, maybe in particular context. Okay, so as we have already mentioned in the first slide, that in this lecture we are going to start neutral and positive messages, right? They are the messages that are most frequently used at workplace, and almost all professionals are required to write these messages. And well, the happy part is they are the easiest in writing because they use most of the cases they use a direct approach. So we shall see this. First, understand neutral and positive messages. Then we will also talk about the direct approach that is usually followed for writing these neutral and positive messages. Well, in the workplace, most messages are positive or neutral and therefore direct, as I have mentioned, right? So almost 70 to 80% of the correspondence you have at workplace, that is either positive messages or neutral messages, right? And because of this frequency, most of the time you would be writing positive or neutral messages. So that's why direct approach is used for writing these neutral messages. We shall see, and we shall discuss the direct approach. Well, positive messages are routine and straightforward. They help workers conduct everyday business, right? So this is in a way first step explanation of direct approach, right? That they are routine every day, as I have said. Quite frequently you will be required to write them. That's why they are straightforward, right? So you begin with the main idea and all that. And they are kept straightforward so that they can help workers conduct everyday business. They are not made complicated, and there is no need for buffer and all that, right? Well, such routine messages include simple requests for information or action. They can be replies to customers and explanations to co-workers, right? These are some of them: information or action, replies to customers, and explanation to co-workers. Other types of positive messages are instructions, and direct claims, and uh, complaints. Well, emails, memos, and letters are the channels most frequently used in for positive messages, right? So an email can be positive or neutral message, a memo can be positive or neutral message, a letter can be positive or neutral message. So these are the most frequently used channels for neutral and positive messages, depending on your internal or external communication. For example, if you want to communicate with co-workers, so you prefer memos, or you can go for emails as well. But if you want to communicate with the client, then you should prefer letters, and you can also go for email. Well, in addition, businesses today must listen and respond to social media, though directly that's not part of our uh, this topic, but it's important now. It has become almost mandatory that in addition to these formal channels, right, the companies should also listen and respond to social media. Like if you have a Facebook page, company page, if you have a Twitter company page, or if you are somewhere on other social website, then the comments require replies. If you receive comments from your clients, or usually from clients, then you also need to pay attention. But of course, we are not directly dealing with social media. According to our course outline, that's not that much included in it. Well, moving forward with neutral and positive messages writing processes, you know, how should they be written? Number one, when writing neutral and positive messages, that is, emails, inter-office memos, or business letters, you can be direct because they convey routine, non-sensitive information, right? We will also be discussing negative messages. Perhaps that is after completing these neutral and positive messages, we will also be learning how to write negative messages. Those negative messages usually can be sensitive, right? But these neutral messages, uh, you know they are routine and they are not sensitive, so that's why it's easy to write them. Well, in phase 1 of writing process, determine your purpose, visualize your audience, and anticipate the reader's reaction. So this one, phase number 1 is very important, right? Despite they are everyday routine messages, despite they are very simple, but now you are working in a professional capacity, right? And in professional capacity, because writing has one advantage where you have reasonable time to think and plan. So instead of just writing something in a haste and then just feeling sorry for that if you made any major mistake, it's better to take some time in phase 1 of writing process, where you determine your purpose, that why are you going to write that email, why are you going to write that memo, why are you going to write that letter. So the purpose must be very very clear. If the purpose is not clear, you will not be able to communicate it well. Second, visualize your audience, right? Now, uh, visualize your audience means, of course, on the basis of some background information, who will be a recipients of your audience, who is your primary audience, who is your secondary audience, who is watchdog audience, who is like initial audience, who is gatekeeper audience. If you keep all these five types of audiences in mind, then they will help you prepare a careful message and anticipate the reader's reaction. Of course, uh, you also need to think from reader's perspective, how the reader is going to respond to when he or she reads your letter or email or memo, how he or she is going to respond. That you also have to keep that in mind. Well, then in phase 2, collect information, make an outline, and write the first draft. There are 3 steps. Number 1, collect information. Of course, you will already have done some part of it in phase 1, while visualizing your audience, while determining the purpose. You will have some information. Now, when you sit to write, you should have complete information of the topic or the subject that you are going to write on. Second, you are going to make an outline. What is an outline? It's, you can say, a sort of a rough bulleted draft. That okay, in first paragraph I'll cover these 2 points, in second paragraph I'll cover these 3 points, and in concluding paragraphs I will wind up like this. So this is, you are making an outline, right? And then write the first draft. Well, the advantage of writing is you can write multiple drafts, of course, based on the importance and nature of the message. The more important the message is, the more careful the writer has to be. So you write your first draft, then you can read the first draft yourself, then you can add some information to it, and you should refine it. Usually first draft is not your final draft. So, well, in certain cases, when you become much experienced, that may be the case, but for fresh graduates, and in most of the cases, your first draft is not the final draft. So, having written the first draft, you can give it a second thought, you can revise it, you can improve it, and you can question yourself whether your letter, email, or memo is complete, whether it is concise, whether it is concrete, whether it is courteous, all those writing principles that we have covered. So you can check your uh, memo, report, or letter for all those principles. So that also has to be done in phase 2. Actually, we have covered some part of phase 3 also in phase 2, that is edit for clarity, right? Like proofread and ensure skim value, decide whether the message accomplishes its goal. Goal and purpose, they are very important. Despite you have written an error free letter or email or memo, but if it does not achieve its goal, despite being correct and despite being very well written grammatically and semantically, again, if it does not target the goal, that does not serve the purpose. Well, use business letters when a permanent record is required. Remember, right, as we have already seen in oral and written communication, that if you go for a letter or any official communication, so write it only when a permanent record is required. When confidentiality is critical, that is something confidential that you need to communicate. When formality and sensitivity are essential, right? You know, if these all things have to be taken care, then I think we can understand how careful we should be while writing these official communication. And when a persuasive, well considered presentation is important. If it is a small petty thing that can be covered just on a phone call or on an SMS, then maybe you do not require letter for everything, right? But there are certain things like when it is confidential, when it is critical, when it is formal, when it is sensitive, then of course you need to write a letter to your client. Of course, letter format is used for external communication only. So it means you would be writing letter for a client or for another organization. In either of the case, that will be external and formal communication. Write business letter on company stationery in block style with all lines starting at the left margin. So we will discuss these 2-3 styles for letter writing, and then I'll discuss in detail what is block style and what is semi block style. So when I talk about different formats and the styles of letter writing, I will discuss this point in detail there. So this is where we end this today's lecture. We will cover direct plan, and we will also analyze some of the neutral and positive messages in our next recorded lecture. So take care, and thank you very much.